Good morning, everybody. It's Wednesday morning, March 24th, and this is the Senate Agricultural Committee. We're going to get started on a proposal this morning dealing with hemp and cannabis. And we have Michelle Childs with us, our legislative draftsperson. Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning.
And Kevin Ellis and Pedro Lim, and all the committee members. And I think we've all met a week or so ago. And so I'll skip by the introductions of everyone and we'll get right to the draft that Michelle, would you like to run through that draft that you sent us? And
sure,
we'll go from there.
Okay to share my screen with y'all?
Pardon?
Are you guys okay with me sharing the screen? Some chairs don't like it because you can't see everybody. Is this okay?
Sure, as long as you don't take any more than that.
Okay.
No, go ahead, Michelle.
Okay, so great. So what I have here is an amendment for discussion that addresses the issue of cannabis establishments and dispensaries being able to purchase and process hemp under their cannabis establishment license or their dispensary license. So I know I don't have to give you all the backstory. You know that all the hemp stuff is completely separate from the cannabis regulation. So hemp is controlled by a chapter in Title VI and the cannabis in Title VII. A completely separate process for licensing that we're in the midst of setting up. And so the first licenses are supposed to be issued next spring. And then the witnesses had brought an issue to you around concern whether or not, if someone is licensed under the new cannabis system, could they purchase hemp products for processing and inclusion in any cannabis products that they might be either manufacturing or selling. And so I know the witnesses had suggested an amendment in the cannabis chapters that would change the definition of cannabis. Right now, the definition of cannabis excludes hemp, and they were looking for kind of to build on that exception and say, well, it doesn't include hemp except under certain conditions. And I have a reluctance to changing the definition of cannabis to include hemp because we've gone to great lengths to date to kind of keep them clearly separate and make sure that we're not jeopardizing anything in terms of our hemp program, our hemp pilot program. And so I talked it over with Grady because he's the expert on hemp. And so I think we decided that the best approach to address this would be just to make an amendment within the cannabis chapter, specifically authorizing those licensees to be able to handle hemp. And so you have so what I drafted it as a potential amendment to S25 because that is on the floor this week, but I just wasn't sure where it might go. So I just drafted it as an amendment, individual amendment. There's two sections. The first section, section 20, starting on line 6. This is just adding an exception there because there is already something in current law that says clearly that the cannabis chapters don't apply to the regulation of hemp. So I just did a little carve out there on line 9. And then you have a new section on section 21. And so this is adding section 870 to Title VII. And this is within the cannabis establishment chapter to say that hemp flower and biomass may be purchased and extracted by a cannabis establishment licensed pursuant to this chapter. And so those are the adult use licensees. And then, or a dispensary license pursuant to chapter 37. So the dispensaries are currently regulated in Title 18 Chapter 86, and they're regulated by the Department of Public Safety. But one thing that's happening is that they're to move over to the Cannabis Control Board from DPS. Last year in Act 164, they had them moving over in March, but S25 moves them over earlier, moves them over July 1st. They will continue to operate under the Title 18 provisions till they switch over in March. So that doesn't change. But under the current scheme, under Title 18, dispensaries can purchase hemp and handle hemp under their existing statutory scheme. And so this is just that when the new one drops down in March, they would be able to do it similarly. And so they can purchase and extract the flower and biomass as long as it was obtained from a hemp grower that's registered under our current program, or if they are registered or licensed in a state authorized to produce and sell hemp under federal law. And so my understanding when talking with Mike was that that's possible currently under our existing scheme for the hemp.
And that, and what about the testing, Michelle? Is there have you built in regulations of the testing to make sure that we aren't running over any limits, for THC or any of that?
Well, the thing here is that when you're talking about, we're talking just regulating here the cannabis establishment. So they're already authorized.
Okay.
Mike and I are trying to silo it, right? So it's like, it's not changing anything with regard to who is registered under Title VI to grow hemp. This is just saying that if you are licensed under the new cannabis law, you can also you can also work with hemp. And so, it's, I think it's permissible under the current law, but the witnesses would like some better clarity about that rather than leaving it up to the board. There is a provision in current law that requires the board to adopt rules regarding additives to cannabis products. There's not much discussion of hemp in the existing cannabis laws other than if you're a retailer that's going to be selling cannabis products and you also sell hemp products, you're supposed to clearly label those as such in your retail store, so that consumers aren't confused about which product they're, and you have to kind of keep them separate. But that's really all that's addressed currently with regard to the hemp. So I think it's permissible under current law, but the witnesses, and they can speak for themselves, but I think they're looking for clarity on this at this point through legislation.
So it's really, this is clarifying the law to make it very clear that it is an allowable use.
Yes. Yep. But it's not changing anything with regard to your hemp program. Again, we didn't want to mess with that or jeopardize that by injecting the cannabis issue into the hemp program.
Or it's not changing the cannabis regs either, right? Only it's clarifying the language that you can use hemp as an additive to cannabis.
Yes, it's specifically authorizing that. It's silent on the matter in the current law, but has the board adopting rules with respect to additives. So it's totally permissible for it under the current scheme, but I guess there is the possibility that the board could put forth something and say, they don't, that a cannabis establishment couldn't be working with hemp. But I mean, I think that would be arguably tough for them to put forward because there are some specific do not combine cannabis with certain ingredients under the cannabis license scheme. So there's a specific prohibition against combining cannabis and alcohol or cannabis and nicotine. And that's in statute. So I think if the board was going to interpret it that they could say you can't combine it with hemp, I think there's a strong argument to say, well, we would have said that in the legislation. But there's no harm in articulating this specifically in statute. I'm just saying that if you didn't, I personally don't have a lot of concern. It wouldn't be addressed by the board, but I understand the industry, wants more certainty about that.
Yeah.
So page 2, subsection B, is that the cannabis establishments and dispensaries can obtain and process the hemp in the form of distillate or isolate, and all processed hemp derivatives shall be accompanied by a certificate of analysis showing potency levels for all those chemical compounds that I can't pronounce. And that's modeled after Illinois. And subsection C is just kind of a cross-reference about the provision I spoke about the adoption of rules with regard to additives. And that's it. So it's pretty straightforward. I'm hopeful that Pietro and Kevin might think that this will address their concerns if you're interested in moving forward.
Yeah. And are there any questions from committee members of Michelle at this point?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. Michelle, I'm trying to get my head around this because I heard you say that this is sort of already handled, and there's a lot of investment and energy that's gone into the hemp and the CBD business world today in Vermont for the last several years. There's a lot of sort of pent up energy to go into the cannabis THC world, and this explicit blending of them. I can't give you a good reason, but it does make me a little bit uneasy because I don't pretend I understand all of the ramifications. And I'm not convinced there's a rush, but I want to just explore. You sort of said, I don't think this is necessary. And that's kind of my assumption. I mean, if somebody is growing or processing under the cannabis scheme, there's no part of the state that is checking up on what kind of cannabis plant you have, right? So cannabis producer could grow some CBD cannabis. Nobody cares about that, right? I mean, help me understand. I get that maybe it's a little not clear, but is there a what problem are we really aiming at? And the reason I ask is every time we talk about this on the floor and bring floor amendments, especially, there's an unease. And I got to be convinced that it's really worth it before we take that on, because everything was just complicated. So, Michelle, can you help me understand? You sort of said, I'm not sure this is necessary. Everybody wouldn't mind a little extra clarity, maybe. But what do you think, Michelle, this clarity brings? Does it make a real change? Or is it just simply a little belts and suspenders?
I think that what the witnesses are looking to do, I think, is totally permissible under the existing statutory scheme, and the way that I view how this would be working with the board and the adoption of rules. I would anticipate that this is all going to be a part of that, and it would be a board decision. But if you want to be absolutely sure that it's clear to the board that a cannabis establishment or dispensary can be handling hemp separate and apart, but do it under their, it's not any kind of violation of their license under Title VII, it's fine to certainly, be very direct in that and include that in there. So, this was not a discussion as part of Act 164 last biennium around these two. And as you know, because you're always dealing with Mike and in your committee on the hemp issue, they very, very separate issues intentionally. So we're probably going to see, obviously, as the industry grows, more and more of a blending of the two, right? So people who are currently growing hemp are probably, many of them are interested in converting to cannabis and obtaining a cannabis license. And maybe they would want to be registered under the hemp program and have a cannabis establishment license. But, I don't know, that would be a question for Mike about whether or not that would jeopardize something under the hemp program. That's where the real, I think, concern is. But this is just talking about cannabis establishments having hemp. So
Yeah. See, this is, and again, nobody is nailing this, but this is my concern, that there clearly are people in the hemp world that are warming up to get into the cannabis world. That is, everybody understands that. But there are also people in the hemp world that are happy in the hemp world and don't have any desire, I believe, to go into cannabis. And I'm a little bit worried that this shift may be undermining those people, without us fully understanding it. So to the extent I'm expressing hesitancy, that's part of it. But anyway, thank you.
Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Senator Pearson's question prompted me to think about this as well. And I'm probably not going to say this the right way, but this seems like a one-way street to me. In other words, if you are already having a cannabis license, you're asking for an additional ability to grow hemp, but those who only have a hemp license are going to get that same sort of flexibility in their world. And I'm wondering, how many people are we talking about that need both licenses, if you will?
But is there something in the law that says you can't have both licenses? I don't think there isn't anything in this bill or this draft that would prohibit going either way. I can't see. Maybe I'm missing it, but
there isn't. I guess the question I would have, and it would be for Mike, unfortunately, I'm sorry I can't answer it, but is about, the practical implications if you had someone who was growing both. Is that a concern in terms of the hemp program because of the federal rules around that and what's required to be a part of that project? I don't think that anything in amendment or in the statutory scheme jeopardizes that. And so that's one of the things we wanted to be very clear about, is we didn't want to mess with the hemp statutes because they're created in a way to make sure that you're in compliance with federal law. And so, but I don't know the answer to the question if somebody was growing hemp and then decided to apply for a cultivation license and then they were doing both, what their liability is with regard to the hemp and the federal program.
Hydra, did you have a question? I see a hand go up.
You did, and I was hoping if the committee would allow it, or you, Mr. Chairman, would allow it, that I would be permitted to speak to the issue that Michelle rightly raised. And so look, the concern here, and I think again, remember, I'm a lawyer and I work with courts in terms of statutory construction and application, and this is my fear. If we were adding vitamin C to cannabis, it would be an additive, and we wouldn't need to worry about any changes to the current statutory scheme. It's fine. What is different here is we are changing the nature of the CBD oil through the process in turning it into, as part of this combination with cannabis, into THC. And so quite literally, a court could easily conclude that is not an additive. That is a transformation of the CBD oil into something else. And so the distinction for me is, if we were just putting CBD oil into a cannabis product and say, look, CBD oil is healthy for you, so when you use the cannabis, you get these other health benefits, that would be one thing. But what we are proposing and the technology that exists allow us to use cannabis and CBD oil in combination and turn it into relatively pure THC. That's the gap that we're concerned about. And now let me transition for a moment to Michelle's draft, which I thought was excellent. And I think it does two things. It creates certainty around processing the CBD oil into THC, and then puts it under the umbrella of the cannabis statutory scheme and the cannabis board. And I think that's all for the positive. But it does something else that I'm not sure I had considered. What it does is it expands the marketplace for hemp farmers because it grants an ability to process the hemp into THC, first making isolate or distillate, and then later into THC. So hemp farmers in Vermont have a broader marketplace for their product. So that was, Chairman Starr, that's what I wanted to raise.
Yeah. So, Chris, do you have an issue with timing? Because that bill, that bill's up this week, and today's Wednesday, so I don't know if it's tomorrow. I think that bill comes up.
Today, it's today, and
It's today.
so yeah, I mean so I mean I'm not enthusiastic. I can't articulate myself well because I'm not understanding this, and I guess if it were left to me, I would encourage our friends here to work on this on the second half. This bill goes, is only just getting started in our process. Yeah. So, but I'm not gonna throw down over this if the committee's interested. I'm just be honest and say I'm not understanding all the ramifications. This is a brand new industry. I think, frankly, it's why we set up a board to handle some of these more nuanced considerations. And I'm not sure of the harm if this gets sorted out in year 2 of our market. I mean, you talk over the years, we talk about having a mature market, and it will take many years. You don't even see that in Massachusetts and other states that have been 4 or 5 years under a tax and regulate scheme. So I'm not seeing the urgency, and I'm a little uncomfortable acting quick, but that's just me. If committee.
Well, this is a Senate bill, right? And so it's got to go to the House. Kevin, have you talked with any House members at all to see, what their feeling is? Like, I don't know if this should be, we haven't, in ag, we haven't dealt with cannabis really hardly at all, but we've dealt with the hemp. So I'm wondering, have you talked with, so I would expect this bill will go to judiciary on the House side. And I really haven't talked with any of them to see if they would take this proposal that we could, I think we could send them a letter or whatever asking if they would please consider this because of its timeliness coming to us kind of late. But it all makes sense to me. About being able to combine the products without having a lot of problems with the regulators and clarifying the language so you could do that. But this is only the second day, I guess, that we've really worked on this. What do you think about something like that, Kevin, politically working?
Mr. Chairman, I think that's great. I don't want to put the Senator Pearson in a difficult position, and I see,
Why not? He gets a big bucks.
I, um, and we're, a letter to the House Judiciary would be great. Our goal here was to get this issue on the table so it could be discussed. And we're happy to go over to the House Judiciary Committee and introduce the issue with a little more deliberation, and see what happens. I think that works fine. And I'm grateful to Michelle for putting her head on this and putting pen to paper. So,
Well, and
great
it
progress.
would also give us an opportunity to talk with Senator Sears in our Judiciary Committee, asking them, to think about this. And Michelle, of course, is in there probably about every day. And, it would give our whole side more opportunity to get used to this. And if we could support it over on the other side to some degree, I'm sure we could talk with Carolyn in the Ag Committee about where we are, on this. We're late getting started, but would ask that they would consider it. And Senator Sears, if we can get him to buy into this, he could talk with the House Judiciary Committee as well.
Yeah, it was Senator Sears that sent us over to you because he was busy with racial equity and a lot of other issues. So that's what led us to you. And I'd love to get some advice about whether we should go talk to House Judiciary or House Ag first. We'll do both, whatever you want.
Well,
It's actually not House, it's House Government Operations. So Judiciary, now that cannabis in Title VII, Judiciary doesn't work on it all in the House. And
Okay.
I think that's probably going to shift over in the Senate as well to be Gov Ops, because they're still with the criminal and civil violation, cannabis stuff. And so now that it's really just regulating an industry and setting up the agency, it's the Gov Ops Committee. So it would be Representative Copeland-Hansis, and then if you wanted Ag, to take a look at it, decide and make a recommendation to House Government Operations on the issue.
We'll do it.
So what's the committee agreeable with that we would, punt this over to the House to me, it sounds like it's clarifying language. And if it would allow our hemp guys one more sales outlet, their sales haven't been, to this point, haven't been that great. If it would allow an additional market for them, I think it would be good. I don't think cannabis growers are going to want to grow hemp unless they've got plots of land lots of miles apart because of cross-pollination and stuff. I think they'd probably just as soon let the hemp farmers grow the hemp and buy what they want to buy from them rather than fooling around growing hemp and growing cannabis. Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm fully in support of your suggestion that we allow the other body to consider this.
Yeah. And you guys are okay, I guess, Kevin. I think you've got a pretty good crew to work with there in government ops on the other side.
Yeah.
So that should move along, and Michelle's already done the heavy lifting. So that's good. So that's what we will do, and wish you well, and hopefully we can get this done for you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the committee.
Thank you,
Yeah.
everybody. Have a great day.
Yeah, and thank you. So, Linda, what do we got up next?
At 10 o'clock, Michael's going to come in and walk you through H434.
So we haven't got anything until 10. What about our bills that we've got 100 coming up today, and
Both of them. And 102.
102. So is Brian Campion's going to offer the amendment from education, and we're all on board with that. I know, Brian, you had a question on the process.
Yeah, and actually, I've just received emails that indicate that S100 is going to be asked to be passed over today. We have apparently some folks that are getting real nervous about the impact on local school budget. So that, I just got that from one of the other senators. It says Senator Campion agrees this is a big issue and the bill will be passed over today.
Oh, shit. That's really bad. Yeah, I was talking with Brian earlier before you guys all got on, and
We're still on YouTube, by the way, Senator.
yeah, that's fine. I hope it's wired into every superintendent's office in the state. But, you know, we spend, if you think about it, $1,600 million bills on education. And we can't afford to take 25 of those and feed the kids. I mean, it's like having, if one of us had $1,600 in our pockets and we're at the grocery store quivering over whether we should spend $25 on food. I mean, it's ridiculous that that's even an issue in the system. And my own little district is getting over 10 million new dollars on top of that to spend on something in the next 3 or 4 years. I mean, the whole issue is baloney as far as I'm concerned. It's and I think it's time that we get a shot in the spine and stand up and take that crew on. Anytime they run short of money, they certainly know where to come and ask for more. And what we have 2 school budgets that didn't pass this last year at town meeting. So what they're doing is blowing smoke, and I don't think school board members or the superintendents have even read the bill. You know, we've got, if it puts them over the spending limits, that's in there to protect them. I mean, we did a heck of a job putting a system together to make sure our children get fed properly without a, I mean, I don't know what they think, but anyways, Brian.
Yeah. So from what I'm gathering, it's one line in the bill that's creating most of the issue. And I think it's in Chris's part of the bill. And the line says, to the extent that costs are not reimbursed through federal or state funds or other sources, the cost of making available school lunches and breakfasts shall be borne by school districts. So that's where they're coming down and saying, you know, if the state doesn't want to pony up the money and the feds don't want to pony up the money, it's going to fall on the local school districts to do that. And I think that's the one that's causing the most heartache.
Yeah, the other thing, you know, so do we agree that we have about 280 schools? Something like
Yeah.
that, isn't that what we've heard? And 70 of them. So we really have 210 schools left. And if you
Well,
take 20
70 to 80, Chris.
Sure. But let's say there's 210 schools and they've got to come up with the $25 million and there's 210 of them. It's $120,000. I mean, it's, you know, so if you're a superintendent, maybe you got 4 or 5 of those. It's in 5 years after. I mean, it really, I think you're right, Mr. Chair, that, you know, somebody's sent out provocative emails.
Well,
may
you
or may
know
not-
where it came? It came from the executive director of the 3 groups. Last week, we got that nasty letter saying that we were all messed up. Well, then that got sent to all the school districts, and of course, the school districts, I doubt if they saw the bill, but they got that letter pushing them to push us. Well, tough luck as far as I'm concerned.
Well, and you know, we're not oblivious to the pressure this means. We just haven't pinned it down exactly how we do it, but we've talked about helping them make the transition. We've talked about the federal dollars. We know the sales tax is performing well, so the ed fund, you know, there's no reason to think this is a direct hit to property tax. There are a lot of variables here.
Well, and
Anyway.
we aren't completely broke, and I would expect when the committee starts dealing with the 22 budget, that some of that cost will get picked up by us. But you know, hell, we got to work through the system and work with the system, and you know, I don't know, but I hope that we stick to our guns and move forward. You know, three committees voted the bill out unanimous, and that says quite a bit. So anyways, so we're gonna pass over that I guess today.
That's the word I got.
Yeah,
Can we talk about some other scheduling things? Just
yeah.
so maybe Linda could take us offline.